What's up? Welcome back to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. I'm your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by. Also, welcome to the One Stop Co-op Shop podcast. I am here with two Andrews, very, very noteworthy people in the board gaming space. We're talking about Earthborne Rangers, the Kickstarter project. We're talking about Earthborne Games, the larger new company, and we're going to get into that in just a second. But we know why you're here, people. You want to know about games. You want to know about a Kickstarter. You want to know about the thing that is in front of you. It's like, should I back or should I not back? We are going to break all that down. But first, I'd like to introduce my guests. Yes, two Andrews. I'm going to lead off with the founder and CEO of Earthborne Games. You may know him from such titles as I got a lot of Fantasy Flight over here. Was involved with Fantasy Flight for many years, including its creative head for a couple of years, but has since moved on. Also, our friends at Chip Theory Games worked with them for a little while, but is now focusing most of his efforts on this project and this company. It is Andrew Navaro. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jason.
All right. And down below, we have another Andrew. We're going to call him Fish by request. He is one of the lead designers on Earthborne Rangers, also late of Fantasy Flight, moving on over. Did you work with Fantasy Flight?
Yep. I worked for Fantasy Flight for about 10 years.
Yeah, and there you go. And has moved on and is lending his design talents to this new project. So Andrew Fisher, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's exciting to be here.
All right. So yes, we are going to, we'll do the interview in two parts. One is I really want to focus on the game. I think that's what people are really here for. And we could tell, I mean, and the second part will tell the story about, Earthborne, the company, depending on how long we go. I mean, it's maybe two parts, but we'll see how it goes. But people are really excited about this game. We have a Discord and we have a community on the One Stop Co-op Shop. And we've been talking about this game ever since the announcement, honestly. We love LCGs. Like if you look at the top 100 solo games, it's top 100 solo games. It's a lot of card games. it's Arkham Horror, it's Lord of the Rings, it's Marvel Champions, Sentinels of the Multiverse, and there's a lot. We love our card games in the solo and cooperative community. So we're looking at this one is the same but different, and there's a lot of differences here. So let's start with Earthborne Rangers. Let's start with just giving I've heard it a couple of times. We talk about Man vs. Meeple. We're talking about Shut Up and Sit Down. We're talking about all different outlets, but I'm going to have to go there one more time to give the elevator 30,000 feet pitch for what is Earthborne Rangers.
Do you want me to take this one, Fisher?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's your baby. You should pitch it.
Sure. So Earthborne Rangers, as you mentioned, Jason, it's a cooperative, customizable card game. It's similar in a lot of ways to some of the LCGs you might be familiar with, but it's also different in a lot of ways. So in our game, you'll be taking on the role of a ranger. You're a protector of a mountain valley in the far future. And our game is primarily focused on exploration and going around and experiencing the world, meeting the people of this valley, meeting the strange creatures and animals, and kind of traversing from location to location, and discovering the story that we've created. We have it takes place on a kind of an open world map, which is very different from those other games that you described. And when you sit down to play, you really have the opportunity to kind of go anywhere. You'll have missions, kind of like in those games. You'll sit down, you'll have a mission that you can put in front of you, and that can be your goal for the session. But you can also just choose to ignore that mission and go someplace else, do something else, find new things, find new missions, and then go do those things instead. So yeah, there's a lot to do. It's a big open space, and I feel like what we're really trying to do is to take that medium, that customizable cooperative card game medium, and take it to new places.
All right. So how we're going to break this down is, me, people, I'm a theme guy. So like we're going to go into theme, and we're going to talk about the story, and we talked about like kind of the far future and how that plays out. And then yes, I will talk about mechanisms, because that's in terms of the feedback. So I put it out on the Discord what they want to ask about. Everyone wants to know about mechanisms. We will get there, people. I may even put a timestamp on that. But before I get to either of those things, it's an interesting group that you've put together. So Fish, you are what would you say in terms of your design role on here? Are you lead designer? Like, how did that process come out in terms of how this actually has developed on the table?
I kind of came on the Adam and Brady Sadler
Right.
designed the original design of the game. And our developer Brooks has been working to create cards on the game. And I kind of came on to help bring everything together, kind of get everything ready for Kickstarter, and help kind of coordinate the design here, getting to this milestone.
So this is a Sadler, in terms of whose name's going to be on the box in terms of primary design. It's going to be the Sadler brothers.
No one's name's going to be on the box.
Oh,
but,
okay, interesting.
But everyone will be in the book.
But
yeah, so yeah, it'll be Adam and Brady Sadler. It'll be Andrew Fisher. It'll be me. It'll be Brooks Fluger-Levitt, Sam Gregor Stewart, Evan Simonette is doing the artwork, and also Joe Banner, who's helped me build the world and the concepts and stuff. So it's a more collaborative approach, I think, to crediting than I think what most people are used to. But if you're wondering what the design pedigree is, yes, Sadler's.
Yeah,
sure.
our community is like, what, Sadler's? Interesting. Was that intentional, and is that going to be kind of an ethos of Earthborne Games, or is this just kind of like sui generis to this project?
No, I think that's something that I want to try to carry forward, because I feel like, coming from FFG, where we, like we were just talking about this the other day, where we had a very strict, credits system. It really created it was kind of needed to be done out of necessity, just because of being a larger company, and needed to be very dispassionate. But I feel like it also doesn't necessarily like really get to the heart of what everyone does on a game, and how it is a very collaborative process. And there's, designers get a lot of credit, and they should, but the designers also need their team around them to help make the game as successful as it can be. So I feel like, from my perspective, like trying to get that, that more communal view of like what it actually takes to make a game, and making that part of what Earthborne stands for is important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think you can definitely see it on the team we have working on Earthborne Rangers, right? Like the Sadlers designed the game, but naturally, as Brooks is designing cards, they have to design all sorts of new mechanisms to help function with those cards. As Sam is writing this campaign that's really connected to how the cards function, right? A lot of our writing is reactive to player decisions the players have made. A lot of Sam's input impacts the design as well. Like, we have graphic design, obviously, as you saw when you're playing. The graphic design of the cards impacts how you're interpreting the board a lot. So everybody kind of contributes to that design credit in a way, right? It is a very collaborative process.
And so I know a little bit about this because I know a little bit about LCGs, and you can tell us all about it. There is a cloud of people behind those LCGs, is there not?
Like a bunch of people?
Yeah, I imagine, we're talking in the dozens.
Yeah,
of people that have their hands on an LCG. Because, and we're talking, not that this is an LCG because this is licensed. Final Fantasy has LCGs, but like in terms of what this game will be, an expandable card game with lots and lots of stuff. So like whenever you get that scenario, you almost like have to bake into your mind that like it isn't just Nate French, or isn't just like whoever. It is a ton of people.
It's a massive team that makes LCGs run, and that was my original, coming from a large company where I had a bunch of resources and a huge team. It took me a minute to recalibrate to reality, and being on my own, where I was originally envisioning this game as having a release model similar to like an LCG of old, where it was essentially like a new release every month. But the reality is that just takes such a monumental effort by so many people that it's pretty unrealistic to expect that I'd be able to do that right out of the gate. So this game is definitely built to be expanded upon, but the way we expand it is very much undecided at this point. We're in the middle of a Kickstarter right now. A lot's going to be determined by that. But yeah, it's definitely built to be expanded, and we'd love to expand it. And I look forward to crossing that bridge when we arrive at it.
So cool. So that's how the kind of like overview and some of the like the guts of how this game came about. As I promised, we're going to talk about theme, right? This is your story, right, Andrew?
Mm-hmm.
Like the story that you wanted to bring. So then what people notice is that it's a lot more cheery than your usual LCG. It's very green. It's very, you know, like lush and I think like, you know, listening to the podcast that you've done, you want to do something different. You wanted kind of the future, but you didn't want it apocalyptic. Like this is like a really like kind of like nice apocalypse. Uh which, you know, like the actual sense of the word apocalypse is like it's just our we've come to associate it as like this destructive thing.
Mhm.
But you know, it doesn't have to be. And so maybe talk a little bit about like, you know, it doesn't like we are not headed towards the trash heap of Fallout. We might be headed towards something different.
Yeah. So, I mean, that was something that, I've taught, like you mentioned, I talk about some other places, but yeah, it, something that really struck me, just like kind of like a bolt about, our imagined futures and how much energy we put into this idea of, you know, humanity like ruining the earth and it being irrevocable. And I started to wonder, are we helping to create that future by buying into that idea and putting so much energy behind it? So when I imagined the world for Earthborne, I tried to imagine a world that saw humanity in a better light and saw humanity as being able to learn and improve, and in so doing, make the earth better and heal it. And so this game world takes place, you know, thousands of years in the future, and it envisions peoples of the earth that are very different from what we are. They have very different values, and they have very different sensibilities, and they have an inherent sense of needing to protect the earth, needing to caretake it as their home. And that's kind of like the central driver behind all of the motivations of the people of this world and of the people of the valley, which is the one culture we're focusing on for the first game. But that's not to say, you know, there's not like hard road ahead. Like that, our vision for the future of the world takes into account, you know, pretty cataclysmic, you know, change on the earth. But instead of it being destructive, it's healing. So it, you know, you can imagine, you know, like when you're sick, you know, you have a fever, you're not feeling very great, and then, you know, you hopefully eventually recover. It's imagining the earth in kind of that same way, where it goes through a period of healing, and that's a pretty rough time for humanity. And then, but we come out the other side of it, you know, profoundly changed, and that is where the game then begins. Is a couple, actually, a 1,000+ years after that moment. So they're just very different than us. It's been fun to imagine.
Fisher, how much are you involved in that world building aspect?
I don't do as much of the world building myself. Generally, Andrew and Sam Gregor Stewart have done a lot of that, kind of like creating the world, you know, like figuring out what the valley looks like. I've been more working. I kind of then take that material and then figure out how to mechanically implement it in a cool, thematic, top-down way.
Mm-hmm. Do you go on hikes?
Oh yeah. I'm actually slightly embarrassingly going to the Boundary Waters up here in Minnesota. That's kind of a big protected nature area. I'm going there next week, right in the middle of our Kickstarter. I had permits are a little hard to get during since the pandemic, and so I had a permit for this week since a long time ago, and so. So I'm actually camping appropriately right in the middle of our Kickstarter.
Yeah, right when we're going to be doing all of the reveals about the rules. And, it's fine.
It's fine. It'll be fine. Okay, so in terms of the just hammering home some of the theme stuff before we get to the mechanisms, are there cities in your world?
Yes.
There are cities that even closely resemble what we're used to in 21st century America.
No, not at all. I don't think so. Well, you know, it's hard to say. Like, so we have ideas about, you know, other places in the world, and, you know, in the game, you will meet some people from those other places. But, you know, we wanted to focus like really small at start, and then kind of, you know, build out from there and build the world from this one central point, and then see more and more of the world. So yeah, saying blanket, there's no cities like that. I can't really say that because we haven't defined everything. So what I would like to imagine is there's all sorts of different cultures experiencing all sorts of different things all around the globe. They have this one, commonality that they care about the earth, but but how they approach that is going to be very different based on their culture and based on their own communities. My great dream is that this becomes so popular that other creators from around the world will be interested in creating, their portion of the world in this setting. Like, I think that would be that'd be phenomenal to have people from different countries and different cultures envisioning what their version of their hopeful future looks like, and then being able to interpret that through the setting. That'd be great. I'd love that.
Well, I mean, like, because we always bring our biases. We always bring our preconceptions about environmentalism. Like, if you read a lot of environmental fiction, you can kind of, if you look under with the fiction they're writing, like, you can sense what ruins the world, and everybody has a different idea of kind of what ruins the world, and we'll get to that in a second. So like Tolkien, there's no accident that the orcs were like underground at forges, and like industry, like whenever you saw the orc, you saw the movies, they were like, the furnaces are blasting and smoke was everywhere. So like, and then, you go to the, the Ents and all the natural stuff. So like, there was a definite sense of like, okay, we cannot, like, anytime humanity gets too big and too clustered, there's a problem. Right. And so the fiction becomes like, okay, everybody's pastoral and spread out and all that kind of thing. And then there's a slider among these things. Like, okay, when we get to cities and when we get to like these larger gatherings, what they look like. So I don't know if you had any kind of like idea of like, okay, anything industrial is bad, is that going to be the road to whatever? Or is there a thought of kind of like, because you do have an artificer in the game. So like, I imagine there's some sense of building and craft.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, like I think the difference is between like that word industry, right? Like, industry is this like kind of inherently
industry
dangerous thing, right? That like kind of like self-perpetuates. That's different from building and constructing and improving, and that exists. So I think that the biggest thing, the difference is that the people of Earthborne don't see the earth as a giant pile of resources to be mined and exploited. They see it as opportunity, and they know that it will provide them everything they need if they just take care of it. So they create what they need. They might create beautiful works of art. They might create like gorgeous, like resplendent cities, but they're not going to do that in a way that's going to be destructive. They're going to do it in a way that harmonizes with their environment in some way. So yeah, there's I think I think it's a pretty dangerous misconception of humanity to believe that we are the same as we've always been, and we will always be the same as we are now in the future. And I think that that there's a great opportunity for humanity to change and grow over time. And I think that's granted, I'm not going to live long enough to see this, to see these theories played out. But I feel that we make choices as individuals, as cultures, as governments, as societies, and it really just takes making different choices to change the trajectory of things. So. So I feel like the people of this world, again, like they're so removed from where we are, and they've experienced so much difficulty and hardship, and then come through the other side together through cooperation, that it really is fundamentally changed who they are and changed the perception of each other. So they don't war with each other, they don't fight over resources, they cooperate with each other and help each other out. And I think that's a beautiful sentiment.
Okay, so who's the bad guy?
There's no bad guy.
What?
Oh my god, revolutionary.
Going back
Blow your mind.
Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings is Sauron, right? It's not like it's not the Ringbirds. It's Sauron. Star Wars, like in the title, like we're entering into a war, right? So in so many of the fiction that we're familiar with, the enemy or the conflict is front facing, like right there. You're walking into some kind of conflict or resistance or whatever it is. So there is no front facing bad guy.
There's no gigantic villain waiting to invade and destroy. That is
like in an environmental game, it would be like, some hulking machine with like plumes of smoke rising out of it.
It's
or
not
whatever.
like, Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, where it's like, oh, this is a beautiful place, and oh, now there's this thing coming, or I feel like that is the oldest story. It's really boring. Like, everyone would suspect, like, oh, this beautiful place, like, clearly there's going to be some, it's like the last rainforest, and there's going to be this like industrial thing coming and threatening, and you have to fight it off, and that is
and save the land for people who are connected with it.
It's so predictable, and I don't want to do anything like that. It's I think it's thoroughly boring, and it's totally played out. But that's not to say that, when I say there's no bad guy, I think there's no Sauron. There's no like, there's no mythos. There's no Thanos. There's no like
Cthulhu.
There's no there's nothing like of that, but like that. But there are consequences. There are dealing with the fact that the world is the way that it is, and that us. So like, if there is a bad guy, if there is any bad guy, it's in some ways it's us. It's the ancestors of the people who live there. And part of what we're setting up is like kind of like the fun like sci-fi-ness of the setting. And the great thing about sci-fi is this like is that a lot of it is about like making choices and the consequences and dealing with those choices. Is that the ancestors of these people, who are us, made a lot of decisions to do things to try to fix the earth, and they put into place some mechanisms that were successful, but then after they achieved success, now they continue and grow and evolve and change and mutate, and there's things that are like out there doing stuff that are kind of dispassionate and don't necessarily hold human beings in any higher regard than they might any other organic organism that they might see as a threat to the earth. So so if there's any bad guy, it's more of the choices that the ancestors made, and then seeing those consequences play out and then dealing with those consequences. So there might not be a bad guy, but there's plenty of danger.
Are there monsters?
There are monsters, yeah.
Okay, I think we need monsters.
Yes, no, there definitely are monsters. When you played, you didn't get to see any of them, but there are quite a few in the demo. But we call everything beings. Our monsters are more like what you are called biomelds, which are kind of like these bioengineered creatures that have kind of like speed evolved over a couple thousand years to become these strange creatures on unknowable missions.
I think that
I will say,
yeah, good.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say that any monsters people see in our demo area of Earthborne Rangers pale in comparison to some of the stuff you might find in the southern end of the valley.
Right.
that is not available in the demo, but we do have developed, and there's some spooky stuff down there. So
yeah, absolutely.
Never fear.
Yeah,
or I guess fear a lot.
In a way, like I guess I'm trying to evoke the skeptic.
Yeah, of course.
Right, the person, because I've met some, and not that I'm a skeptic. I'm a happy guy, but just seeing, having everything for somebody who's looking at the project and going, this isn't what I'm used to. Exactly. And what are we used to? We're used to looking, the first thing you see, the dragon, the Cthulhu, the big glowing eyes or whatever it is. Like, and that's what draws me in, because my goal is to overcome this, right? And then the assumption, and maybe it's not a fair one, but it is what it is. Like, if I don't see that, then I'm getting a certain type of game. I'm getting kind of a light, fluffy story game, or I'm getting like a jaunt. I'm not getting a game like this. I think there's some people that kind of say that in order to be a game, it has to be like a contest, and I got to win or lose. And the way you tell that to somebody is by showing them the monster or showing them the whatever. Is that something you're nodding? So I imagine you've encountered that.
Oh yeah,
mindset.
Totally. I mean, to me, that's just again, like, the stories that we tell are just this, oftentimes it's the same stories over and over again. And I think that's true in in cooperative games, especially. Like if you look, like you mentioned, like you look at the options out there and it's like, oh, who's the bad guy in this game? Like you asked me, like, who's the bad guy? Like everyone is like kind of obsessed with this idea of a story having to involve like direct conflict with another entity that's trying to destroy you in some way.
I think
And
I mean, I think it's the way we tell stories, but it's also the way we game, right? I think that there's if you gamers, that's a fraught term, right? Because who is a gamer? But I think, like, we're talking about like the hobby gamer, especially the Kickstarter backer, and we'll get to Kickstarter back in just a second. Like the Kickstarter backer, the super backer, the one who just backs a lot of things and is constantly trolling, that there's a tendency, and I don't want to speak in absolutes. The tendency to say, quote unquote, where is the game? And by that, it means, where is the choices? Where is the challenge? Where are the numbers to crunch? Where's the buttons to push? So we can kind of like bleed into theme and mechanism over here, because we'll talk about mechanism. Believe me, I'm getting into mechanism. And so there was this idea that, like, okay, I'm seeing all this beautiful stuff. I'm seeing the nice narrated thing. Where's the beef? Where's the game? And the game being the challenge, the bad guy, all that kind of thing. So,
so
tell me
the challenge, the game is there. Like the bad guy does not a bad guy does not need to be present to have that. A bad guy in the sense that you're describing, that very narrow, and from my perspective, like thoroughly boring approach that, again, like I want to try to offer something different and new, and something that, it takes the idea of an adventure game and then wraps it around something that is unexpected. Because I think, to your point, like I feel like the perception is to have a game that is more approachable, that isn't about like constant conflict and violence. That those games have to be like these abstract, still nice games, like Parks, or like Photosynthesis, or like whatever, or like Calico. Like it's got to be about cats on a quilt. I don't think that that's the case. I feel like there's plenty of room for adventure, and there's plenty of room for danger and excitement without building up this artifice of inherent conflict. And I feel like, there are so many different stories that are told in other mediums through written fiction or through film. And that just because there's not like a bad guy in a drama, in a way that's like super threatening to you, like they're going to kill you, that doesn't mean that drama can't be like really thought-provoking and engaging and exciting. And that's the goal with this game. And I've seen several comments, people's like, well, if it doesn't have a loss condition, then then what's the game? Like, to me, that's just such an absurd notion, because the game is built around narrative, and that doesn't mean that there's not a narrative outcome that you don't want. Like there are narrative outcomes that if you don't do a thing in the way you want to do them, you won't get the outcome you want. So just like winning and losing, your outcome you might want is to win, you might lose. In our game, you might want a very specific narrative outcome, and hopefully we've created a story that you care. That's the goal, is to create a story that you really care about the outcome. So if you get an outcome that you didn't like, that's going to feel just like losing. But to me, like like conceptually, the idea of winning and losing in a game, especially in a co-op game, again, is like everybody does that. Like it's what every game does. And it doesn't mean that it's because this is the best way to do it. It means that I think a lot of people just aren't very creative, and they want to just like, okay, this is what works, we're going to keep doing it. And I think it takes like trying to think about things differently to try to like move the needle and create a different experience. Like if I was just going to do another, cooperative game in the mode of, Arkham Horror or Lord of the Rings, I wouldn't bother. Like you just play those games. So yeah, doing something different, I think is really important. And I think for the people who are worried about there not being challenge, there's lots of challenge. for people who are worried about there not being a loss condition, the goal is for you to care enough about the story where there absolutely is a loss condition if you don't get the thing you want. Those things exist. I think it's just, wrapping your mind around it in a different way and considering that there are other possibilities out there.
From a design perspective, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we've. I was going to say, I think we've set ourselves up with a bit of a challenge here because one of the cores of our game is exploration and discovery, and so a lot of the story, and I can assure everybody out there that there are stakes and there are things at stake, and we have we have very concrete plans in that regard, and those different outcomes Andrew talked about, yeah, there's a variety of outcomes that you are going to feel, but part of the way we want this campaign to emerge is for you to kind of discover these stakes yourself and have your personal investment in these stakes. And so we also don't want to just lay out over half the campaign for you here and spoil it in the Kickstarter. And so we've kind of created a slight challenge for ourselves in that regard. In that I think at the end of the day, people will have to trust us that we have something cool in store in this campaign that you are going to kind of discover and uncover as you explore the valley and do your job as a ranger. And it's really going to kind of raise some of these questions of what does it mean to take care of the environment and steward, the planet is in a much better place in our setting now, but it didn't get there by accident. It got there by a lot of intentional curation that is ongoing. And what does it mean to be one with the environment and curate the environment when a lot of the environment was actually created by people in the first place? What is even natural anymore? What does all that mean? And how do you make these big decisions that could have ramifications on your environment? What's the quote unquote right thing to do? These are kind of the decisions that we're going to have, the players are going to be wrestling with. And even though there's no villain, you can be sure that different people in the setting are not going to agree on what the right answer is. Right. And so there's some very interesting questions that we have, but I do want people to discover that for themselves. So unfortunately, we haven't been able to talk about them as concretely as we might like to.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jason.
No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you hit on a point right there, Fisher, about villains, and I think again, another thing that and the fact that there are other characters out there who might have a different opinion about how to proceed than you do, and I think that's really how we're approaching villains in our setting, is that instead of just slapping the villain label on them and say, oh, that's the bad guy, or oh, those people there, they have Raider above their head, so I can murder them.
Yeah, they're wearing the wrong t-shirt.
Yeah, exactly. So that to me, I think is it's a really dangerous road to go down mentally. And it's something that I'm not really interested in continuing to support. So for me, you might view someone as villainous in the setting, but any character you meet like that, you will be able to sympathize or empathize with their position. You'll see how they got to that point and why they have the opinions that they have and why they approach situations the way they do. And you may be at odds with them, but you will also have an understanding of them as a person. And I think that's a really important thing to point out.
Okay. So I think that what gamers are asking, I don't think that we necessarily want that dragon to be. I think we've been acculturated to that, right? And I think that we're locked in a little bit of a mental binary of unless I have the dragon, this will be quote unquote just a story game.
Right.
And I won't have the buttons to push. Right. At the end of the day, we want the buttons to push. We want to be able to turn the card, play the card, and then I love what you said, Fish, about stakes. I want it to mean something that. We're craving meaning. And the way that especially in adventure games, the way we've coded meaning is beat the dragon, the devil, the Cthulhu, whatever it is. And so there will be stakes. There will be buttons to push. If I tap this card, it will mean something. If I have to discard these 5 things, that will hurt. It will hurt. It won't just be a different thing. You're throwing a different needle. right? And that's just I guess the challenge has been communicating that in a clear way. Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that it's when Cthulhu is a incredibly easy button for, what are the stakes? Well, like sanity and the world, right? Like
the universe.
It's an easy button. You can exactly see what it is threatening immediately, right? And our setting is a bit messier, and that is that makes it tricky, right? Like we don't have that like single villain that is like, this is threatening the valley, beep, right? Like instead, there's a bit more complexity and nuance to it. And like I said, like a lot of it's things we want people to discover along the way. So I think it is a communication challenge, and we've definitely seen that across this Kickstarter, is really communicating what that is. But like, do know that like I think that interesting narrative comes from drama and stakes and like investment, right? And so that is something that we are hopefully weaving throughout this story for you, but hopefully in a bit more of a nuanced way than just your evil overlord who's going to snap their fingers and wipe out the valley.
Yeah, and I think you can also just look at the team and the people on this team and how many narrative games we've made, how many like campaign story focused games we've made, and how many games we've made that are just like the ones you described,
all over the place.
Yeah, just like the ones you described. So it's not like we're like that we don't understand like how to make a game that has a villain. Like that's almost all we've done, which is exactly why I feel like it's important and interesting creatively to explore new ground. So I think like, if it's fine to be skeptical. Hopefully you'll play it regardless, and then you'll see what we mean. But I also think that our catalog of work speaks for itself, and you can fully expect that we take the lessons that we've learned from working on what really are a lot of very classic and really highly regarded cooperative games. We've taken those lessons and we're applying that here, so we know what we're doing. I guess. Long and short of it.
It perfectly bleeds into the next question, and I'm getting this straight from our Discord. That this project, so you launched, and there was a problem with the launch, right? Like there was like right, the button didn't quite work.
Can I tell you what, man? Oh, geez, I'm never.
Tell the people what exactly the problem was.
I'm never so I never learned what the actual problem was. But
drum roll.
Oh gosh. So like obviously I've been we've all been working like extremely hard getting ready to go, and I've put in months of effort in like gearing everything up for the launch at 10 a.m. Central on July 27th. Like everything was about like building to that moment, and I was like I've been working 12-15-hour days, just one after another. My family's been incredibly supportive, and the moment arrived. I was totally prepared, had everything ready to go, everything queued up. We had the mailing list ready to go out. The website was going to switch over to like Kickstarter's Live, like coordinating with a bunch of people to try to make everything work. And my youngest son and my wife were in the room with me. We're all excited. And at 9:59, I wonder if it's because I pushed it 1 minute early, but I wanted to make sure that it was live at 10. At 9:59, I pushed the button. And then it just sat there.
Drum roll.
And it says drum roll. And I'm like, no. And then my wife's like, is it supposed to do? I'm like, I don't know. And then I just sat there, and I sat there for like 10 minutes just waiting. I was like, well, maybe it just takes a while. And then another 5 minutes passed. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't seem right. So then I refreshed, thinking, oh, maybe I just need to refresh it and it'll launch. No, it refreshed and it brought me back to the beginning, and I had to push the button again. So that sent me down like a nightmare, a couple hours where I was trying to figure out what to do. Tried to contact Kickstarter customer support. You can't reach a human there. You put in a thing on an email. We'll get back to you in 1 to 2 business days. I'm like, that I can't do.
And we're all barraging Andrew with our technical help, like clear your cache.
Yeah. I did all that. I restarted. I did the whole thing. So yeah, eventually, I was able to get an email from a couple different sources. Someone in a Discord like said, "Hey, here's a guy who works there. Here's his email." And then there's also a guy that a friend of ours had spoken to at the beginning of the year. His name's John Ritter Roderick, who works at Kickstarter. So I got his email and I sent him an email. I was like, okay, thank goodness I have someone. And then I get his out of office response.
Oh,
he's on vacation. I'm like, oh no,
no.
So they're like, oh geez, well now what am I gonna do? But then, God bless him. 5 minutes later, he responds and it's like, hey, I'm on vacation. We'll get this fixed. Here, email Anya Combs, who's the director of games outreach, and I'll let her know that they'll give her a heads up. So I emailed Anya, heard back from her. I emailed her, I think, like during lunch. So I was like just sitting there, like refreshing my email in my mailbox, also continually pushing the button, just hoping that eventually it would work.
If you think a 20-year game industry insider just keeps it cool all the time, no way.
Well, I went from like highly anxious to very calm. I was like, okay, well, clearly it's this is just how it's supposed to be. Like it'll launch when it launches. Everything's cool. But then I got my response from the from the help desk, and it was like one of those like it's totally bland, like, we are sorry for your problem. Like your problem is very important to us. I'm like, and that made me a little bit aggravated. But anyway, she got back to me and that was great. She said, hey, yeah, sorry, we'll expedite this with the team, and I'll let you know as soon as I hear anything. I never heard back from her before it went. Like eventually, I think it's maybe the 23rd time I pushed the button, it just launched. So
okay.
I was like, I guess it's live now.
Wow.
So it was a pretty harrowing 4 hours, but yeah, it worked. And then we still funded day one. We funded in like 5 hours, which was really awesome. So went from a very stressful and emotionally exhausting morning to a really very tiring and emotionally exhausting in another way night. So it was all good in the end.
So that was a little bit of a tangent, but I'll get back to the original question. That's fascinating. I think I like the joys of Kickstarter.
Oh man.
So the decision was made to launch the Kickstarter without a lot of gameplay video, right? Yeah. And there wasn't a lot of like I don't believe there's like a rules book or like a rules PDF available, right? There's not.
No.
Like it's a very like the theme is very front facing and the art is very front facing and the people are very front facing. So like, wow, the Sadlers, wow, Andrew Navaro, wow, a great pedigree. And I think I've the comment that I got was, wow, this game is kind of funded on pedigree and it's funded on the names. Yeah. I trust the names, right? That's kind of how that funded.
And that means a lot. I mean, I'm incredibly grateful, and it's gratifying to have that level of trust with the audience.
And so, but without the gameplay video, so like that's what a lot of feedback was. Why not put in more gameplay at the very, very beginning?
Yeah, I mean, really, it was I think we've done a really good job, at least a lot of the feedback I've received, of like, making Earthborne seem like a larger entity than maybe than it really is, with more resources than it maybe has, and because it looks good, and again, like I feel like we know what we're doing in that regard. I think people have come to expect that from Kickstarters these days. Is like, leading up to the Kickstarter is just like months and months and months of just like, here's more gameplay footage of this thing, and then it launches and it has like 20 bajillion videos on it that whenever I go to a page, I just kind of like scroll over, like, I'm not going to watch any of these things.
I make some of those things.
I know, but there's too many. It's like information overload. You know what I mean? So I might start to watch one, but at the end of the day, like, I'm still just going to like be looking at the Kickstarter. Am I interested in this thing? Do I think it's cool? And I'll back it regardless. Like I think I just come from a different type of person where like I'm interested in the idea of the thing, and I will, if I think it sounds cool, I'll just buy it, and like I'll make my own decisions as to whether or not I think it's good, and I'm not really worried about like knowing like all the mechanisms or all the ins and outs of the game before I feel like I need to make a decision. I'll buy most of my things on, largely on impulse and feel. And just what I hear from other people. So it's really more of like a retail buying kind of mindset. And I think again, because of where I came from, which was a retail focused company, that's where my mind is when it comes to like how to present a game. So
because Fantasy Flight doesn't have a lot of gameplay videos.
No, we don't do any gameplay.
We're not seeing any of that.
No. It's like a couple previews and like whatever, and then the game releases, and then you take a chance. You know what I mean? There's not that Kickstarter kind of like a billion things. So that's different. That's the world I come from. So like that's where my mind is at. But also it's just a matter of practicality. Like there aren't a lot of us. Like we honestly have this gameplay like in a spot where we're happy with it and comfortable like really showing it and like showing the game at its best, ready by the time it was ready. Like I felt that I was comfortable like going into the Kickstarter with a like let's show the art, let's talk about the concepts, let's talk about the basics of the rules, let's like give you all that foundational stuff where it's like if you believe in the project and you think it's going to be cool, like you have enough information to make a decision easily. It just doesn't have that like what has become a very prototypical Kickstarter thing to do, which is gameplay up front. And that's something that Chip Theory does too, right? Like, Chip Theory doesn't give out gameplay stuff before their Kickstarter launches. They do it during the Kickstarter. And I learned, from being there that is okay and good, and you can get people excited during the Kickstarter by making a big deal about when gameplay becomes available. So really that was our thinking, and obviously that'll all be history by the time this posts. But we were kind of hoping, maybe trying to shoot for having that first gameplay video hit the day before. But in reality, like we just had, in addition to doing all the work on the Kickstarter, we had to do the work on, making the demo look nice and get tightened up and getting that all like nice and play tested. And it just, took the time that it did. So, but in the end, it's coming out on the day that I originally planned, which is the first Monday, after the launch of the Kickstarter. And we'll be doing, gameplay live streams, every Monday after that, at least. So you'll look forward to like 3 pretty nice, big, beefy gameplay demos by the end of the Kickstarter. And if you're familiar with Team Covenant stuff, they're going to be fun. They're going to be engaging. They're going to be hours long. So you're going to have so much gameplay to check out by the end if you want to hold off, until the very end to make a decision as to whether or not you want to back. You'll have all that information by the end. So that's everything that went into like why that we didn't have that gameplay up front.
It's fascinating how like just swimming upstream in these ways, so like not having the noteworthy bad guy, not having the win-loss condition, not having gameplay front facing. It's like kind of, I don't know if you intended to do this on purpose just to like kind of like shake up our minds, but like it really did run into like the things we've come to expect. I wouldn't say it's the right wage with, like I think about, way back in the day, like Kingdom Death Monster launched with no gameplay whatsoever. It closed with no gameplay whatsoever. It closed with a bunch of like gnarly minis. And it's like people just backed it like crazy because the minis look great. So it's more like that than it is,
and that's that's a really cool game. Like I think that game's pretty badass. I've had a lot of fun with that game. But yeah, no, I did not go into this saying like I'm going to do everything different. It's just kind of worked out that way, and I feel like a lot of it is more about just like shaking it up for me, as opposed to like shaking up for the audience. Like Fisher can attest. Like when I was first bringing him on board, he was grilling me on all of these questions about the game, and he asked me like, who's the audience, and my first response was me. I'm the audience for this game, first and foremost, because I want something that I think is interesting and something that challenges my preconceptions and something that is different and fresh. And I've played so many games. I've helped make hundreds and hundreds of games. And my point of view is such that it's really hard for me to get excited about things because it feels like it's a lot of just retreading the same territory over and over again. So I feel like there are other people out there like me who are, happy to keep playing like fun thing. Yeah. Happy to keep playing the same thing.
I couldn't get into the LCGs. It's the same thing. Marvel. I love Marvel. How many bad guys am I going to beat? I want a story. I want,
Yeah. So like, trying to do something different, something that was like a game that if I sat down to play, it was something that I would enjoy and it would really like draw me in and that would really engage me and get me thinking and something that would stick with me for years. So that's really the goal behind this game is to try to create something that is just a phenomenal experience and something that you'll remember for the rest of your life.
So Fish, that list of questions is fascinating. Like, I would love to see, because I imagine that a lot of backers have similar questions. So like, what were the front-facing questions when you first heard about this game? I imagine you had a bunch of them, but like, what were some like the most important ones, like the audience thing, and then maybe some others?
Yeah, I mean, let me see. Let me bring up the document. No, well, like when I came on board, I asked a lot of the same questions that like we think about when launching a product at a place like Fantasy Flight as well, right? You're looking at what are the core themes, right? Like what are the main themes that we're trying to evoke with this gameplay? And you get like the normal boring stuff like playtime and general complexity level, yada yada. But the other stuff we're looking for is the stuff that drives vision. Like, what is the vision for this game? And so core themes are one. And then another big one that I found really useful is kind of that who is this game for, right? Like I think there's different there's a marketing term for it, but basically you create like a couple hypothetical people that are the people you want this game to resonate with. Who is going to love your game, right? And so like we talked about that person. And I did snarkily write in my document under one of those people was just Andrew Navaro. But we had other hypothetical people who we want to appeal to as well, right? Like who we think that this experience can appeal to. And then you kind of keep that person in mind. You keep the core themes you want to evoke in mind, and then you keep that person in mind. And the core themes can kind of help inform what like dynamics you want the mechanics of your game to be creating, and then that person can kind of inform how you're going to be teaching the game, right? How you're going to be presenting the information and how you're going to be teaching the game, because a different person is going to require the information presented in a different way. And so those were two really important things. We also got into a bunch of other stuff like what is really working about the game right now? What is your favorite thing that's working in the game right now? And as with any game in development, what are the things that are not working at all? Which parts of the game just aren't achieving right now? And so we got into some nitty gritty like that. But the kind of like themes and players are those two like high level questions.
Mm-hmm. So whenever I think of, so we've talked about the world a lot, and the way when I think about adventure games, I think of them in like 3 buckets. There's like player side stuff, the board stuff, and then the overall story, right? Those are 3 things that I kind of think about. We've talked about story, we've talked about a lot, and I'm sure we'll hear more. In your like, what would be the best pedagogically? Because now we'll get into mechanisms, like really teaching what people are getting pedagogically. Do you begin with like, explaining what the player side does and like going through that? Or do you begin with the world stuff and kind of get into that? Or is it like a mix of the two?
So yeah, I usually when I sit down to teach, as you experienced when we were playing a little bit ago, I'll kind of talk about who you are and what you're playing, the character you're embodying. Then I'll talk about the valley and how that is represented. I'll talk about like all the different pieces that kind of represent the world that you are going to be in, and that includes your objective. normally when I'm teaching a game, objective comes first and foremost, but as per our previous conversation about theme, I felt it was more important to talk about you embodying your character before, and I include the objective as part of talking about the valley. And then finally, we talk about the actual like moment-to-moment gameplay of the round. So that's kind of the importance I give is you the character that you're embodying. You are playing a character of your creation, and there's kind of a role-playing bent to all of this. And so I wanted to put that really forward, and then the valley is a close second. And then the actual like round-to-round gameplay, while still important, is just how we evoke the themes of you in the place. So that's why it comes third.
Yeah, I think like in terms of the actual round to round, I think people are interested in that because they want to be able to make sure that the player stuff matters. I don't think they need to know like the details. They just want to know like there's a there. And it's not just like, okay, flip a card, read it, and then move on. Right. So yeah, let's do that. Let's go 1, 2, 3. Let's go and let's start with player side, because that is how you started with me. Player side. It is a deck construction game.
Yep.
Right. Not deck builder in a way like we're building a deck during the game, but like we're pre-constructing a deck, and then we're going to implement that deck. So maybe talk about a little bit about the deck construction. And along the way, we took some still shots. The TTS is like, I'm not, huge on the, the software needed to kind of like stream the entire thing. And it's like, it's not in a state to be really filmed, but we did take still shots, and I'll be kind of splashing those in throughout the interview. And so if you listen to the podcast, pause the podcast or go to Team Covenant and like listen to some of the or watch some of their coverage. I'm sure there's going to be like tons of stuff. So for the benefit of the video, I will splash in some screenshots, a couple along the way. So then player side, we've constructed the deck. What am I doing, and how am I doing it?
What are you doing in the game? Or
what am I doing? Just constructing the deck.
Just to build the deck. Yeah, totally.
Deck.
Character creation. You're going to be making kind of several big decisions. So first and foremost, you're going to be deciding on your aspects, which are kind of your stats in the game. We have different aspect spreads. Four
aspects.
Yep. So there's 4 different aspects, and then they're represented by a card in the game, and we have cards. I think we have cards that represent every possible aspect spread, if I'm not mistaken, Andrew.
Yes,
right?
we do.
Yep.
Yep.
And so you get to kind of choose your stats and how they're going to be distributed. And then you're going to make a few decisions that determine what kind of card pools you're going to be pulling from your character. So you're going to be deciding on your background, which kind of represents what you did before you joined the Rangers, your history as a character. There's several different backgrounds that are going to determine which kinds of cards you're going to be using. Then you're going to be choosing a specialization, which is kind of representative of what you're doing now in the Rangers, what role you play in the Rangers. And as part of that, you get to choose a role card. Each specialization has a couple role cards. Those are the cards hopefully people have seen in our other materials that go on the board and give you a special repeatable ability that you can really build your deck around. Finally, you get to choose your personality, which is a more general pool of cards. You don't choose like with background and specialization, you'll choose a specific kind of category that you'll be pulling cards from. With personality, everybody kind of gets to pick from all the different personalities based on just the restrictions of maybe what aspects they have. Some personalities might be locked off depending on how high your aspect values are. And personalities allow you to kind of customize your character to you. Some of them, mechanically will enable certain combos. Others, they're all pretty good cards. Some players might just decide to pick them based on the theme of the card and how they want their ranger to feel, right? Like, is your ranger more kind of considered, or are they just a little more impulsive, right? And you can kind of make those decisions at this step. Finally, we have.
I apologize for interrupting.
No.
In terms of like, because when I played kind of a healery ranger, right? A lot of there's a mechanical fatigue. We'll get to that in a second, but like a ranger that can mitigate that fatigue, right, and take cards out of the fatigue pile, and a ranger that focused on like more one-shotty abilities, where I could have focused my ranger on like having a lot of tools and having like weapons and knives and like that feels different.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Like whenever it gets to an adventure game, I think people think in terms, not just like in terms of like the high level sorcerer bard, they think of like, the mechanical role. Think of like World of Warcraft. Am I a healer? Am I DPS? Am I one-shotty? Is there going to be that type of outlay here?
Oh, absolutely. There's several different kind of deck builds we're enabling here. So to get a little nitty gritty, I
People
believe
love nitty gritty. They love it.
by the time this is out, there should be a couple updates talking about this as well.
Sure.
There is so the backgrounds. There's 4 different backgrounds in the core set, and each of these specializes. The backgrounds as a whole are kind of your enabler cards. These are kind of what set up your combos, right? They whereas then your specialization cards are like the execution cards, right? They execute on the setup from your background cards to to get things done in the game. And so we've kind of divided it into how you set yourself up and then how you execute. And ideally, each of our different backgrounds can pair with each of our different specializations to kind of enable you to set up your 4 different potential specializations that execute in 4 different ways can be set up in 4 different ways from your 4 different backgrounds. So the background shepherd, for example, is that's a type of person who has worked with animals their whole life and is very connected to animals. And so a lot of their setup cards are going to involve working with the beings on the board, moving things around, setting them up within reach, maybe gaining resources based on how many beings they've gotten within reach. And so a lot of their setup is going to involve animals, whereas somebody who's like the artisan is somebody who's worked with objects and crafting and like working with their hands. And so they're going to be a lot about gear and like a lot of their setup and gaining resources and enablers from that background is going to be focused around the gear on your board. And then as far as execution, you might have somebody like the explorer who's all about putting progress on obstacles in your way or on your location to travel. They're all about executing on travel. So a shepherd explorer might be somebody who is like enabling themselves through the animals in play, through the beings in play to execute that travel, right? And so like on a very mechanical level, they set themselves up that way. Whereas like an artisan explorer is somebody who is getting their travel done by setting up like a little engine in front of them of gear, and then using that to set up and execute on their traveling cards. And so ideally, there'll probably be some pairings that are better, right? Some will work better, and I'm sure people will come up with all sorts of cool different deck builds. But ideally, you can build a character from any combo based on kind of what parts of the game appeal to you.
And you can also build it in terms of the cooperative nature. So it's like you mentioned travel. Travel is like a more back-facing thing, where it's like there's stuff in front of you, you got to deal with it. But then there's that overarching goal. It's like I got to get to this place and this place and this place, and that's more of a long-term thing. You think of like a Heroes of Terranov, another Sadler Brothers thing where it's like, okay, I have to deal with what's coming out of me, those orcs and those goblins, but I also have to move from room to room. Otherwise, I won't be able to do what I'm doing. And this won't have a timer like, every Fantasy Flight game has a timer. That drove me nuts, but everything's pushing me towards somewhere. I don't want to be pushed. Leave me alone. But in, that timer setting up, okay, you must move from room to room. So then if you're thinking like a 2-player game, one player might be like, okay, I will be the animal person. And because the animals are more front facing, they're just going to flow towards me. And then the other person can build towards, I want to be the progress person. And obviously that's simplified. It's not going to be that simple, but like people can go into it at least with that general mindset. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that groups will kind of talk about their characters, and certain characters will synergize well with each other. So, like building up that, like kind of group rapport of like how your decks are going to play off each other is going to be really important. Additionally, for our solo players out there, building a deck for solo play is going to be something like you're going to have to make some choices around your deck specifically angled at solo play. Like having a 1 in certain aspects in solo play might make your time in the valley a little more challenging. So like I'm sure there'll be people who make different solo play deck builds that kind of have that all-comers, well-rounded vibe to them. And so I think some of our backgrounds and specializations will probably shine in solo based on kind of the deck builds we've made ourselves.
Will that be highlighted in the rulebook?
So we are going to give some recommendations to people in the rulebook for some like for people who just want recommendations on like some of the good combos and choices. People who just want to like get a character together and start playing and know that they're going to have some of those synergies in the game already. So we'll have some recommendations for that. But overall, the character experience, I think a lot of players will want to, really get in there, roll up their sleeves, and like make a deck and find the combos themselves.
Mm-hmm. Okay. If you at any time, Andrew, you can chime in.
Well, I was gonna say, like in my experience, the community that follows is almost always better at suggesting deck builds for this type of thing than anything we could possibly suggest in the rulebook. So we will have, I think, what amounts to like kind of what Fisher was saying, what amounts to like a kind of like a quick start. Like, hey, if you like, or like what you might find in like a boxed RPG set where it's like, here's you can make your character, but here's some pre-builds for you if you want to just jump right in. So we'll do something like that where you can kind of just construct a deck right off the jump and just get playing. But the character creation is so much fun. And you played the demo with some pre-built decks, so you didn't really get to experience it, but it's a pretty good time, and it goes pretty fast. So it's not it's not super onerous, even if you're like new to the game, to just take a little bit of time to build a deck. You can build it like Andrew's describing it, like with a very like analytical mindset, and try to build like the best possible like combo and for the cards in your deck. Or you can just like, hey, I like this sheepdog, so I'm going to be the shepherd. And these are the cards I'm going to pick, and just pick stuff on theme.
Yeah, like I want to be Ash Camp Pete so I can have the Duke
exactly
follow me around. I don't even know what he does.
Yeah.
In some games, he's terrible.
Yes,
but I
precisely. Yeah, precisely.
So then, so finishing off with the player, I found that it really like their cards seemed, or my cards at the time, seemed quite complementary to those that aspect system. It feels like the aspect system really is the engine that makes this go. In terms of people who want to know what is this and what am I doing? Like you have these 4 aspects and you're spending energy off of that aspect to do the things, and then your cards complement or like they buff or they take away or whatever it is. So like maybe talk a little bit about that aspect system and the 4 aspects and how that kind of really is the engine that makes the players do stuff.
Yeah. So your 4 aspects, they're each a number between 1 and 3, and you get an amount of energy equal to your value in each of the 4 aspects each round. So the aspects are fitness, focus, help me out, Andrew. Awareness, and spirit. And
it's red, blue.
Yeah, they each have an icon and a color as well, to make them easily discernible. But so you have your 4 different aspects, and the energy kind of determines what you're able to do in the round. And so that at the heart of it, that is your kind of action points. Your capabilities within a round is determined by your energy. The meaningful things you're going to have to do are going to involve spending that energy. So playing a card, you're going to have to spend energy matching the aspect of that card and the cost in the upper left-hand corner. If you're going to perform an action, you're going to have to spend an amount of energy. And the more energy you commit to that action you're doing, the better, hopefully, you'll do on that action. And so a lot of the core of like how much am I getting done this round is all about managing your energy and how much you're spending where. Like, do I want to take a risk? I think you in the game, you were conserving your energy and you just took a risk on like just playing, a single energy on a task, but you could draw -1 off the challenge deck and like end up getting a bunch of challenge effects triggering off of that action. So that conservation was a risk you took. Or you could just blow all your energy to make sure you succeed, but you're getting fewer things done in the turn.
Yeah, think about like Robinson Crusoe, which is up here, where it's like I could put 1 worker chip and have a chance, or I could put 2 worker chips to make sure, but then I can't do as much.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so there's kind of that risk reward, and that kind of like energy management and conservation round to round. So the aspects are kind of at the heart of metering what you can get done before you all need to rest for the round and draw new path cards and keep progressing on your journey.
And there's no separate combat mechanism aside from the aspect system. Correct?
Yeah. So this game is at its core about exploration, travel, and discovery. And so combat is not like a central theme of this game, but it is something that may be a necessity from time to time, and it is something that happens in nature. So you will see from challenge effects as you play the game, predators might attack prey. Natural events may harm beings in play. You have to keep your friends, other humans, safe from the dangers of nature. So there is people can suffer harm. Bad things can happen to people, and in a pinch, there are ranger cards that enable you to attack things, right? I think you swatted some giant bugs that were in your way when you were playing. But also, your hiking staff in the deck you were playing also has an attack on it that, if you absolutely need to, if you're in a tight spot, you're cornered by a predator, you can use that in an emergency. Or I really like one of the cards we designed for the Artificer is called Moment of Desperation, and you throw one of your precious gadgets, and it does damage to a being based on how many charges are on that gadget. So you're sacrificing something quite a bit to do this, but it's kind of evoking that it is something done in desperation. It's not just the default in the game to go out and murder everything to get to your next objective.
It's really thematic. I can say that it was real. I made Andrew smile a couple of times during a playthrough because I was like, I can see the bugs and I'm doing that, just slap, because that's a hike, that's what you do during a hike, or I'm stopping and taking care of this, or if I'm meeting a person on the road, I use my interact stat and to try to get them on my side. You can see it, I imagine in the crafting of all the player cards, that they need to come out, in terms of the interactable stuff, emphasis was placed on making it feel right.
Oh yeah. So there's a term that's I think used a lot by Mark Rosewater in Magic, which is top down versus bottom up, which is talking about how you approach the design. Bottom up is we design the mechanics first, and then how do you theme this mechanical piece you've designed. Top down is you create the theme, and then you try to create mechanics that will make people feel that theme, right? Really evoke that theme. And so top down design is how we've approached the vast majority of cards in this game. We want to make you feel every card and feel like it is a living part of that world mechanically. And so I think the sheepdog is a great example of this player card that you play. Its effect allows you to move other beings around the board, right, as the sheepdog herds them. This would have been easiest, most elegantly executed mechanically by just making an action that you perform to move things around, right? It's just an action. You slap it on the board, done, right? Call it sheepdog. But we didn't want to do that. We want people to, feel connected to their sheepdog, feel personally attached, right? It has a harm threshold. It can get harmed, and that's obviously something you really want to avoid. But also, it exhausts to do that movement effect, right? Your sheepdog is running off. You exhaust it. It goes off and does that thing. And then you have an action that lets you pet the dog, and it soothes a little bit of fatigue off of you. It refreshes the dog, and then the dog can do the thing again. Is it less mechanically elegant than that card I described earlier? Yes, it is. But do you feel way more personally connected to this dog that is yours that you can pet? Absolutely, right? And so that kind of ethos, that top-down ethos of creating things that you really feel is one of our guiding principles as we're designing these cards.
So then now we can talk about the world, because we're getting into that where, so as I did the demo, and I did the demo on TTS, as you're seeing some stills as I was going on the way, you mentioned, well, actually I'll do the top down thing. The first thing I noticed was it's very living. It's a very living world. And that doesn't always happen in the LCG model, right? Where it's just it's a lot of it's on my side. And then each card is one thing, right? It's okay, the card comes out as a door. And if I have 2 successes, the door opens and I discard the card. Here, so much happens, so much procs, so I'm showing a picture right now of the different, there's, a lot of the cards, a lot of the event cards or whatever have 3 different colors, and they all interact off the challenge deck. Right. So talk a little about how, actually, I'll leave it open-ended. So talk a little about how you wanted to kind of evoke the sense of a living world, ecological world.
Yeah, so the primary mechanism we did that through is called challenge effects. And these trigger at the end of each action you perform. you'll look at the challenge card, and there'll be a challenge icon on there, and you will trigger any effects on cards on the board that match that icon. And these will cause these cards to interact with you or other cards on the board and create this kind of living ecology. When I talked about themes, I was, like when Andrew and I were talking about the themes of the game really early on, that we talked about earlier, one of those themes was this feeling of a living, breathing ecology. And I think when we were playing, you asked us, you observed that a lot of our card real estate is dedicated to these challenge effects, these things that like the game is firing, the player isn't necessarily interacting with. And I think, excuse me, and I think that can show you the importance it takes to us, right? Like a rule should take up the space that equals its importance to you as a designer, right? And so these take up quite a bit of space because they're important to us.
Even though the player isn't doing it. So like, I think when people are looking at the game, and I think some of the event cards were pretty fun facing. Like I think the initial Kickstarter video had some of these event cards on it. And from my perspective, I'm looking at it, it's like, oh, I'm going to be interacting with that as a gamer. I'm going to check that. I'm going to like conquer that. But that's not how it works, right? It wasn't me that's doing it. It's the challenge deck that's firing off those powers, and I have to deal with the effects of those things. And so like that could be cool, but that raises the question of, you mentioned the word elegance. Like I think people, when it comes to these, I think that the trend has been to try to like, okay, make it a little bit more elegant, at least the automated quote unquote side. Do you feel like that you have that might be created a little bit too much of a cognitive load on people, the tracking of it? Yeah.
So the cognitive load actually is a great way to frame that, and like how we were kind of thinking about this as we were designing it. That kind of question of complexity was something that was on our mind, and it's something that Andrew and I talked about pretty early on, because as you can see, there's a lot of text on these cards. But there's different kinds of complexity in game, right? There is card complexity, and then there's like board complexity. So card complexity might be, how complex is this one card in isolation? How much do you have to kind of understand to operate this card? But then there's board complexity, and that's a question of how much do you have to understand as these things start interacting with each other in the game. How much do you have to understand and keep in your head that cognitive load of everything going on the board? And so I think what you see in a lot of games is things with very low like card complexity, but that strive for high board complexity, right? And that's kind of viewed as this emergent complexity, this depth to the game. So we've kind of tried to take a slightly different approach to that, that I think achieves a similar effect, which is, each card inherently does have a lot of text on it. However, those challenge effects only fire at a distinct moment, which is when the challenge icon comes into play. Those actions are only relevant when you're looking at what is my total menu of options of actions I can perform on my turn. We've tried to avoid lots of overlapping like passive effects that strain on that cognitive load, and instead have opted for a lot of different effects that fire a certain percentage of the time on these challenge effects. And so what that means is there is a lot of like emergent complexity in how the game is interacting, but it is happening at these distinct times, which means that you can kind of like put that over into the corner of your mind. It's not weighing on your cognitive load. It's not something you have to remember with every single interaction you're doing, but it does inform. And so I think that's an important distinction. Is while this is impacting the board, it is kind of one step removed from the player's decision, but only one step, because what decisions you decide to make, like I think you saw this in your demo, is you decided you were out of like focus energy, so you couldn't interact with a feature that was going to enable you to track down the person you were trying to track. But instead you spent some time like trying to hike through the landscape, and as a result of that, a challenge effect fired that caused the trail to go cold, right? So that challenge effect and that challenge effect triggering is impacting your decision making, because now the next time you go to hike, you're like, oh wait, do I want to wait, rest so that I can immediately jump on track and Quizzy instead of spending other time doing this? And so that So these challenge effects are things that are now informing how you're making decisions, and like how the world is going to change based on these effects is informing and adding depth to your decision making, but in a way that you don't have to like constantly remember all the interactions, as much as just be aware that there are things that can happen on the board.
Right. Like this could happen. Like I could get washed out. I'm taking a risk. It's informing my risk calculation. It's not my like the example people use all the time is Sentinels, where it's like, okay, -1 to all lightning damage and minus, +1 to this one. And now when you really have to keep track of kind of all the time.
Yep.
And so there is complexity. This isn't just a story, John.
Yeah.
Right.
No. Yeah.
So there is like stuff to manage, and I think that's what people are looking for more than anything is like, that they want to manage stuff. They want to like press buttons, and when I had the demo, there was a lot. Yeah. A fair amount. Yeah.
Well, I think Fisher can talk to this too about like the first time we spoke about the game, and the things that were important to me about it is that the narrative is important, the theme's important, but I'm also a card game player. Like I love card games. Like Android Netrunner is probably my favorite game. It's definitely my favorite card game, and that has a lot going on. So like as a card game player, like I want and require engaging card play. So that is that was like top of the list of making sure that worked, and that worked well in this game. And I feel like it's finally getting there, which is really awesome. I mean, at the demo like you played, it like what we created is like a slice of the game. It's an experience similar to like what you'll experience in the final game, but it is not necessarily the final game, right? We will continue to play test, we'll continue to iterate, we'll continue to refine like card games. I've been a part of a lot of them, and there's not a single one of them that did not like continually go through development and play testing, changes being made until the absolute possible last moment as the project was going to the printer. So I fully expect that this game is not going to be any different in that regard.
Right. And so like, I mean, all of this is a kind of an act of reassurance to the audience, who's maybe skeptical people in our Discord and our community, saying, okay, is there enough there for me to enjoy it? And it's like, the answer is yes. The goal of the answer is to be yes. The goal of the answer is not to be like, okay, we'll enjoy the story. Like there is that, but it's not a story that you're used to. It's a different kind of story. It's not, there is quote unquote losing, but it isn't losing the way you're used to losing, where it's like you die and then reset and then move again. It's more like, you lose something of value, or you lose like a goal, but then your world will change and you kind of go off in a different direction.
You got it.
Right. So like there is quote unquote losing. So like, so like, I think saying like, okay, there is no winning and losing, that'll like get into the player's mind. Oh my God, it's only a story game. Like, yeah, I think the idea is like, okay, the losing doesn't look the way you're used to looking at it. It isn't zero sum.
You could have workshopped that with me before I did the script for my video, and maybe would have saved a lot of trouble.
I'm a psychotherapist. We deal with loss aversion on a daily basis. So like, and honestly, like I think Jeff Engelstein's book talks about Achievement Unlocked, I think it's called. It talks about like loss aversion as like the thing in games, and how like you play with players' loss aversion, but that you can do it differently. It doesn't have to be the same old thing of like zero sum. You win or you lose.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
So when I was expressing that in the in describing it in the video, and that text is really straight from the playtesting rulebook that I wrote this past winter. My perception of it in the way that I approached it was like, when I play games like like Lord of the Rings, I think is a great example of that. The Lord of the Rings LCG is that you just straight up lose when your threat meter goes up too high, and then you just gotta do it all over again. And like that's the perception I wanted to avoid, and that's what I wanted to avoid, is like I don't want to have to continue to replay it, because if I don't do it the first time or the second time or the third time, am I even going to play that game again? And in my mind, usually mostly just because my time is what it is, and I think a lot of people's time is what it is, the answer is oftentimes no. Like, do I want to go and just get beat up again? I don't know, probably not. So that was where I was coming from with that, and like I think you're absolutely right. I think that that really got in people's minds, like exactly, like because we're so conditioned through the different types of games we're presented with, that if you say you can't lose, then it's like, okay, well then what's the point?
Right.
And that was not my intent whatsoever.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean, I think like when it comes to excitement, right? Like I think you can make like a delightful game, right? You can make a game with a bunch of like stuff that happens. Ooh, look at that, and the fawn comes and this comes and that. Oh, this looks like this reminds me of a trail. Like that delightful thing is something that a game can do. But I think if you want like an exciting game, it needs to play with loss. It doesn't have to play with loss in that zero sum way, but at least like, I'm going to invest myself in this aspect of the game, and then this aspect it can be threatened by XYZ ABC 1 2 3. And if I lose that, then that's where the excitement comes, because like I want my, like, if I play this walking or like do the thing where you talk about the destroy my my artifice thing, like I want that to be like, ooh, I'm gonna lose this, but I'm gonna do it to gain this other thing. Like playing with that one, I think gamers want that.
Yeah, well, that's what they get, and I think
that's what we're getting. Yes,
yeah, that's totally what you're getting, and I think that that's a very important distinction to make. Is that you're 100% correct. It's not loss as then like as a game over screen. It is loss as like, oh man, I really wish that went differently. But my hope is that you'll just keep going and just see where the story goes. Instead of like feeling compelled to have to redo that until you get the resolution you want. Though, the people will do that on their own anyway. I mean, there'll be people who are just like, nah, this is what I want, reload. Let's try that again. And I think that's a fine way to approach it too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of semantics here where we avoid the word loss, because there's an implication that means game over, load back at a save point, right? But like, say for example, you're on a mission where an area is flooding, right? There's not a win and loss condition, but there's the condition where you contain the flood, and there's a condition where you don't, and that flood wreaks havoc, right? Like, really, like I think we can all see that there's a win and a loss condition there, but they're both story implications that go forward, and you didn't lose the game and restart, right? So like it's hard because we want to communicate like you can lose a mission, right, but you're not losing the game and starting back at a save point. You're just dealing with the repercussions of what you failed to do if you lost.
Right. Yeah, I think if figuring out how to market that is gonna be difficult, but I think that's to really reassure people that this is really a game or whatever. That like you can lose an objective, like you can lose something valuable. You can lose, like you said, for a mission, but that doesn't mean restart.
Yeah. Even the stakes of the main of the central narrative are pretty big, and there's like one outcome that we've talked about that is like really huge, and like I think a lot of people look at that as like the bad ending, but like from my perspective, I'm like, man, I kind of want to see what happens with the rest of the story if we just keep running with that bad ending, and where does that lead? That seems cool.
It's pretty bad though.
It is pretty bad, but it's cool. It's also very cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Yeah,
nice. So I think I've answered a lot of my questions, and in terms of helping people know what this is and what you're accomplishing. Was there anything that we haven't covered that you wish we would have, or anything that you would want gamers to know? I know there's updates coming, and there's the campaign is rolling on, but in terms of anything big that we've missed.
Again, like my hope is to bring everybody a really phenomenal tabletop experience that is both like really narratively satisfying in a way that games usually aren't, and also like very mechanically satisfying in a way that you expect from a card game like this. It's trying to hit both of those things, and I think it's definitely mashing up genres in a way that hasn't necessarily been done before. So whether you back it now or you wait to see what people do, the game is, we've funded, it's happening. So so yeah, even if you're still skeptical after all this and you just want to wait until it hits market and and we gear up again to do marketing as the game starts to come out, that's totally cool. I hope you try out the game eventually, and that it really speaks to you.
Cool. Anything else, Fish?
No, I think that
All right, so that is Earthborne Rangers. I've done as much as I could to answer people's questions on Discord, concerns, criticisms. I think that, I think you have as much information as I could in this format that I could possibly give. And I think that, once again, it is your money. It is your time. Go ahead and check out the project. Hopefully you have enough information to figure out whether it's worthwhile project for you. For me, I mean, it's kind of in my wheelhouse. I'm a big card player. I will be honest. I have not gone in on any of the current LCGs because of what you were talking about, that, I get a little bit bored by like the, enemy of the month. Right. And, I want because the story time always kind of funnels that way. It's like, there's all this cool story that happens and I want to go here to explore that little corner, but then that ignores the big looming thing. And so there's always like a threat meter. There's always like some kind of timer that's pushing me towards something. So like, it's like, that's not my experience. This sounds a little bit more kind of in my wheelhouse, like middle open-ended, and, plan. And there is, and, having done a TTS, there is management. There is card play. This isn't just like turn a card and read. So I think it has a potential to be something that, could appeal to someone like me who is kind of more in the story into things, but wants the mechanical heft too. So that's kind of where I'm at. But I don't know. I've only swatted bees. So catch me when I fight a monster, then I'll tell you exactly what.
Yeah, well, if you want to come back in and play if you want to play the TTS mod again, Jason, you're more than welcome to.
So that's going to be the show for this week. I'm releasing this one a week earlier than intended to answer people's questions on the comments of the Kickstarter page and also on the Discord of the One Stop Co-op Shop. Go ahead and join our community. The link is right in the show notes to join that discussion. So many people wanted to know about gameplay. How does this work? I hope that I have answered the right questions in this interview and that people have a little bit more of a sense of what they would be getting by backing this. I'm also going to include a link to the Team Covenant playthrough of Earthborne Rangers so that you can really get a sense of whether this is the project for you. Next week, we're going to be back and we're going to be talking with the Andrews about Earthborne games, sustainability. It's a very interesting take, some very interesting values, and I can't wait to share with you that discussion as well. So until next time, this is Jason reminding you, if you change your mind, you can change the world. Hey, everybody.